The shuyukh before spoke about the year of sorrow and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's trip to Taif. This was all very overwhelming. One thing to bear in mind is that when you study the seerah, there are so many moments where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is tested by Allah. So naturally a person wonders, is there any relief in any of this? Or is this just test after test after test? The lesson that we're learning that you struggle, and there's no out? We see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam an out. And that out was experienced during the night when he prayed in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reality is that you can be relieved of your pain regardless how heavy it is the moment you choose to relieve yourself. I heard one of the mashayikh saying once you have Allah with you, once you've learned to make and build a meaningful relationship with Allah, the effect of pain that it suffocates you disappears. And the analogy he gave is, having Allah with you does not mean sailing in a sea without waves. Rather, having Allah with you means sailing in a ship which no storm can destroy. So people assume that having Allah with you means no more waves. Everything's going to be perfect. That's not the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet of Allah, his life teaches us, having Allah with you means sailing in a ship which no storm can destroy. You're fortified, you're strong, you're protected. So if you look at the end of Taif, as the Shaykh covered, in the dua that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made when he left Taif, he said, "Oh Allah, whatever happened today and everything that happened today," bear in mind he's covered in blood, beaten, exhausted, lonely, tired, turned down. And he's saying, Ya Allah, everything that happened today means nothing to me. I don't care. It doesn't bother me as long as you are not angry at me. As long as you're happy with me, it's as if he's saying, I'll do it again. I don't mind. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as the year of sorrow concludes, one night he's lying at home with some family members. In one narration we are told it was the house of Hani radiallahu anha. And he was just about to fall asleep. And in that state, the roof above him opened up. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam saw there were a group of malaika that entered into his home, and at their head was Jibreel alayhi salam. He comes and sits next to the feet of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and very softly, gently awakens the Prophet of Allah by moving his feet. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wakes up. Now, as we're reading the story, as we're covering the story, I want you guys to read into it a little. I need you to read into it. A person wakes up from their sleep, they see the malaika there. I'm assuming the first thing you ask, what's going on, man? What are you guys up to? What's going on here? So the malaika must have said that we are here to take you on a journey. You've gone through a lot over the last few years. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to cheer you up. So we have a whole itinerary put together. Tonight's your night. We celebrate you. So they take Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to the Kaaba. And they lie him down and they split open his chest. And they wash his heart with the water of Zamzam. And they seal his chest up. Now if that was me, I would have said, thank you, that was a very special moment. I mean, it is, right? How about we just call it a night, I'll go back home and I'll see you tomorrow. But Jibreel alayhi salam tells the Prophet of Allah, the journey is just starting. The buraq is brought forth, an animal reserved for the riding of only the prophets of Allah. In one riwayah, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was told to mount it and he was preparing to mount it, the animal began to jump a little. It got a little unrested. So Jibreel alayhi salam then said to the animal, "Are you jumping? And the greatest of all prophets is about to mount you." So the riwayah says that this sweat in the animal broke out and it calmed down. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then mounted it. I don't blame the buraq for being excited. I mean, the Prophet of Allah was about to be his rider. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was about to mount that buraq. When someone mounts something that increases its virtue, that, I mounted that thing, I was on top of this. That's why you'll see some of the mashayikh, even when it comes to translating the word donkey, when attributing it to the Prophet of Allah, they don't use that word because they say that the animals that the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam rode on should not be used with a word, should not be translated with a word that we use offensively when talking to one another. So my teacher, when he did the tarjama of the word donkey, himar in Urdu, the word would be gada. But because that word is used in a foul way sometimes, instead he translated as daraz gosh, which means an animal with long ears. Daraz gosh, an animal with long ears. And the idea is that we would show respect to any animal or anything, any possession, any belonging of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mounts the animal and their journey starts. This part of the journey from Makkah Mukarramah all the way to Masjid Al-Aqsa is what we refer to in Arabic as Al-Isra. Asra yusri isra'an in Arabic means to travel during the night hours. أوحينا إلى موسى أن أسري بعبادي إنكم متبعون. Allah Azza wa Jal says that we told Musa alayhi salam, take Banu Israel and leave Egypt during the night hours. أسري بعبادي إنكم متبعون. You will be followed. Fir'aun is going to follow you, so leave. And the word used there to command to travel at night in the story of Musa alayhi salam is أسري بعبادي. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam begins his journey from Makkah Mukarramah all the way to Masjid Al-Aqsa. Now on the way there, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam sees some beautiful scenes. On one side, he's hearing the voices of the trees and the stones that are saying to him, Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. And it's beautiful because where the world has rejected him and he feels lonely, the trees and the stones around him are embracing him and they're welcoming him and they're so excited. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam passes by an old woman on the road. He asked Jibreel alayhi salam, who is this? Jibreel alayhi salam said, keep going, we'll talk later. And as they went on and they got far away, Jibreel alayhi salam then said, that is the dunya. That is the world. That stands on the side of our road of our life that keeps calling us, come here, come here, come here. When in reality it has no life left in it. It has nothing to offer. But yet it swayed so many people from the straight path. After my first lecture, I left the hall. Some of you may know that there was a young man in your community that was shot yesterday and killed. So his janazah salah was here and I went for the janazah. And I was at the burial ground. I saw hundreds of young shabab right there. Hundreds of them, young people were gathered for the burial 5 minutes away from here. And I spoke to the brother, the family members there. And the advice I gave them was, just because I have a relationship with the family, as we were talking, I said to them, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes and gives. There are people who live in this world, there are people who leave the world. Those of us that are in the world must remember when we come to these graveyards that everyone that has been here will one day leave. Don't waste your time in this dunya running after the dunya. Spend your time in this dunya building a relationship with the creator of this dunya. A person once went to the graveyard and he saw a headstone and it said on it, يا واقف عند قبري لا تتعجب عن أمري بالأمس كنت مثلك وغدا تكن مثلي. Oh, the one standing at my grave, don't look at this headstone and be amazed. يا واقف عند قبري لا تتعجب عن أمري. Don't look at my grave and think, man, poor guy, he's dead. Don't do that. بالأمس كنت مثلك. Yesterday I was you, وغدا تكن مثلي. Tomorrow you will be me. Your time in this world is also limited. So I was talking to one of the shabab. There were so many young people there. So one of the guys that was there, I talked to him and I said to him, what do you do with your life? He said, I went to college. What are you doing? He told me he's in business, international business he studied. I said, make niyyah right now in front of me, that tomorrow when Allah gives you money, you will use it to serve the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Because if you don't make this niyyah, my worry is all you will do with the money that Allah will give you is the same thing everyone does when Allah gives them money, they'll buy cars and houses. And they fail to realize that more cars does not mean better life. More houses do not mean better life. That comes through nourishing the heart, doing dhikr of Allah, learning to love Allah and love His Messenger. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never leaves His friends abandoned. Would you ever abandon your own father or mother or friend? Yes or no? Yes or no? So a person who would never abandon their own friend, when they're lonely and sad, how dare they think Allah abandoned them? Do you think you're more loyal than Allah? You think you know friendship more than the one who created friendship? You think you understand love and loyalty more than the one who gave you the ability to love and understand loyalty? It's impossible. In one riwayah, Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam said that it's a long narration, but at the end of it, it's a hadith al-Qudsi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, there is nothing I am hesitant in like the time of my hesitation when I take the soul of my beloved. Because I don't like hurting him, but death is a must. That I don't even like putting my friends through death, but death is a must. So every person must go through that death. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was so lonely in these moments. His wife left him. She passed away. His uncle left him. He passed away. His people had turned against him. His new vision of going to Taif, that had gone down. You know, at a moment like that, you feel really sad. Ask someone what it feels like to bury their mother. Ask them, how did you feel after you buried your father or your child, your spouse? There are no words. 7 years ago, I got a phone call that my mother passed away. Ask me how I felt in that moment. You know how I felt? I only have one description, and I've always used the same phrase to describe what I felt in that moment. I was driving a car, someone called me and said, Hussein, pull over. I had no idea what was going on. My wife was next to me and my kids were behind me. All I knew was that my mother was on her way to Umrah. Her and my dad had gone to Umrah, that's all I knew. They had a stopover in Mumbai. She put her ihram on. She did her ghusl, was making dua, and before she said labbaik, while she was making dua, she fell to her side and passed away. The lady that was there, she told me later on, she said the whole thing happened in 2 minutes. I was sitting next to her, she was just making dua, and she fell to her side. And that lady said, I knew she was going to die. I just felt a presence of malaika, so I called my kids right away. I told them, start reading Quran for this lady, she's going to pass away. And she said, I took water and I put it on your mother's lips. She lifted her finger like this, and she mumbled some words, and she passed away. So I was driving a car, and that time, the guy said, pull over. And I was about to get onto Highway 90 in Chicago. I pulled over, and the guy said to me, Hussein, your mother just passed away. In that moment, I felt as if someone reached into my chest, got a hold of my heart and just ripped it out. I forgot how to breathe. I was choking. My wife was next to me. She said, Hussein, breathe. She didn't know what happened. She said, breathe, 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 breathe. The Prophet ﷺ just buried Khadija radiallahu anha, the mother of his children. All those special moments, the moments of happiness and joy. She trusted him and loved him. He trusted her and loved her. This was love that would never be forgotten. So lonely, so lonely. And if you think about it, the riwayah that says that he was sleeping at Hani's home tells us he even struggled to sleep at his own home. Sleeping between his two cousins. He needed people around him. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never forgets his friends. So Jibreel alayhi salam accompanies Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam until they arrive in Masjid al-Aqsa. And all the Anbiya alayhim salam are all gathered there. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ties his animal to the Qubbat al-Sakhra. He enters into the masjid. And when he enters there, Allah has gathered all the prophets to greet him. Imagine how humbled and honored our Prophet was. All the MVPs have gathered together for the goat. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is walking on the sides. Zakaria alayhi salam, Yahya alayhi salam, Yunus alayhi salam, Yusuf alayhi salam. Each of these people were pillars in the history of this timeline. But above them all now is walking Muhammad Rasulullah. Hafiz Jalaluddin Suyuti rahmatullahi alayhi in his tafsir, Durr al-Manthur, he actually shares some of these conversations. Now bear in mind, these are all very weak narrations. I'm going to be very upfront at the beginning. But they are there and they help build a narrative. And the ulama have allowed to some degree using weak narrations for the sake of qisas and akhbar. He narrates an incident in his tafsir, Durr al-Manthur, that when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was passing by Zakaria alayhi salam, he asked him, how did you do it? So Zakaria alayhi salam asked, how did I do what? So he said to him, how did you handle the loss of your baby Yahya? He died in front of you. How did you handle it? Which shows us that Rasulullah was still dealing with this pain himself, the death of his children. So Zakaria alayhi salam said to him that on that day Yahya came running to me saying that the soldiers were looking for him and they were going to kill him. So I was very sad and I took my son by the hand and I went back to the mihrab where I asked Allah for him the first day. فَنَادَتْهُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَهُوَ قَائِمٌ يُصَلِّي فِي الْمِحْرَابِ. And I went back to that same prayer place and I started worshiping Allah there. And while I was praying, the soldiers came and they beheaded him. I dealt with that pain by connecting myself to Allah. You know, right now in the janazah, I met the brother of the deceased. I said the same thing to him. There's a lot of pain, ache, a lot of heartache that follows death. You have to channel that pain, otherwise it'll consume you. You can't just keep thinking of the smile of your mother, your child, your brother. You have to learn to let that image go. It's hard, it's not easy. I told everyone in my family, I don't want to see my mother's face again. It's too hard. I can't look at her face. It's too hard for me. But in turn, what we do is we focus on doing what we can do, living a legacy that is for them. That's what we do. So Zakaria alayhi salam is channeling that pain in that moment of the loss of his child to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So every time your heart hurts, learn to do dhikr of Allah. Because that's where its peace is. As Muslims, when a person dies, we say, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong and to Him is our return. Allah loved that person more than we did. And Allah will take care of His friends as is suitable for Him in a manner that is appropriate for Him. And that is always going to be the best. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam meets all the Anbiya. They line up for prayer. And it's time for Salah. Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam pushes Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam forward to lead the prayer. And imagine the honor here again. This whole night is about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. After the prayer is done, in one riwayah, Imam Muslim rahmatullahi alayhi narrates, he says, ثم دخلت المسجد فصليت فيه ركعتين فجاءني جبريل عليه السلام بإناء من خمر وإناء من لبن. That after the prayer was over, Jibreel alayhi salam came with two containers. One of them had some sort of a wine alcohol in there, min khamr, wa ina'in min laban, and the second container had milk in it. He offered me both to see which one I chose. فاخترت اللبن فقال جبريل عليه السلام اخترت الفطرة. So I selected the milk, and Jibreel alayhi salam said, you selected what's natural, what's normal. You selected the right thing. And this is interesting because in order to make wine, it has to go through a process. It's not natural. Milk is natural. It comes just in that format. This is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created it. In order for wine to be there, you have to go through a whole fermentation process. And then at the end of it, you'll have. So he says, اخترت الفطرة. You chose the right thing. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he starts the vertical part of the journey. This was the horizontal element from Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa. What's interesting is Hafiz Imam Qurtubi rahimahullah ta'ala in his tafsir, while explaining the story, he actually comments on the word al-Aqsa. Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-harami ila al-masjid. You know what Masjid al-Aqsa means? What does it mean? The furthest. Al-Aqsa means what? Something to be very far. Al-Aqsa. The furthest away is called Al-Aqsa. So Hafiz Imam Qurtubi rahimahullah ta'ala explains, he says the reason why it's called Masjid al-Aqsa, the reason why the Arabs called it that, is because the Arabs did not recognize any place of worship that was worthy of traveling to beyond that point. Beyond that point, for them, the rest of the world was just, whatever it is. But Masjid al-Aqsa was a recognized destination. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam then starts the second part of the journey, and this is what we call Mi'raj. Uruj means elevation. He now begins to elevate upwards into the heavens. For this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates a staircase for them, and the two begin to ascend. And there's so much detail in the narrations. The narrations have so much detail of how this happens, because every time they approach one of the heavens, and Jibreel alayhi salam seeks permission to open the door doesn't just open up. The angel asks, Man anta, who are you? Jibreel alayhi salam then identifies himself, Jibreel. وَمَن مَعَكَ, who is with you? Muhammad. وَقَدْ أُرْسِلَ إِلَيْهِ, has he been invited? Naam. Yes, he has been invited. Okay, the door opens. Marhaban bihi, فَنِعْمَ الْمَجِيءُ جَاءَ فَفُتِحَ لَنَا. Then they open the door and welcome him in. The reason why this is interesting is because it shows us that in the realm beyond our worldly realm, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has everything with excellent tartib. Everything is perfect in the sequence and the formalities, and every detail is very careful. There's no coincidence, there's no mistakes, there's no flaw in design. Everything is perfect. And this happens at every single heaven they go to. They visited 7 heavens. How many? 7. Yet they met 8 prophets. Okay? One more time. How many heavens? 7. How many prophets though? 8. My sheikh, in order to help us remember this, gave us an Arabic acronym. He said, remember the statement, A'yaya huma. A'yaya huma. How that, you spell that in Arabic with Hamza, Ain, Yaya, Alif, Ha, Mim, Alif. A'yaya huma. This acronym right here will tell you which prophet he met in which order. The first is Hamza, or Alif, that's Adam. Ayn and Ya, Isa and Yahya. The third heaven is the second Ya, Yusuf. The fourth heaven is the Alif, Idris. The fifth heaven is Ha, Harun. The sixth one is the Mim, Musa. And then the last one is an Alif again, Ibrahim. Just in that sequence. You guys understand that? One more time. The Arabic word is what? A'yayahuma. How do you spell that? Alif is for which prophet first? And then Ayn and Ya for two prophets. Who are they? Isa and Yahya. And then there's another Ya. Ya, right? Second Ya. Who's there? And then after that Ya, there's an Alif. Are you guys looking at the screen? No, you're not, right? Okay. You're not cheating. And then Huma. Who are the last three prophets? Harun, Musa, and Ibrahim alayhi salam. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam meets each of these prophets. There's a discussion that some scholars have. Why did he meet these prophets specifically? Regarding that, the truth is there is no Sahih riwayah. There's no authentic narration saying this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam met this prophet. This is why Allah chose this prophet. However, some ulama have speculated. I won't go into too much detail on each of their speculations, but what I will say is that they say each of these prophets had a lesson to teach Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, Adam alayhi salam. He was in heaven, he left heaven, and now the Prophet is meeting him in heaven again. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preparing the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the hijrah that's around the corner. You're in Mecca, you're going to have to leave, but you'll come back. Just as Adam alayhi salam made his way back. Similarly, look at Yusuf alayhi salam's story. His own brothers turned against him, but ultimately he forgave them all. And then they became his followers. These Makkans that are against you now, you're going to leave them and come back. And when you come back as a conqueror, act with them just as Yusuf did, and they will become your followers. That's exactly what the Prophet did. When he came back to Makkah Mukarramah as a conqueror, and all the Quraysh were in front of him, his words to them were, I will say to you what Yusuf said to his brothers. La tathriba alaykum al-yawm. You've all been pardoned. And they all became Muslims then. Most of the Quraysh ended up becoming Muslims. And like that, each of the prophets had a particular lesson they were teaching Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Now, as Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam continues, he reaches a place called Sidratul Muntaha. It's this very beautiful tree that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam describes. The Sahih narrations describe this tree, and they said that it has these beautiful big leaves, and it has fruits that are like pots. Qilal. Qilal refers to like pots. You know how they put water inside clay pots back home? Like a big pot. That's how these fruits are, massive, beautiful. And there are these beautiful golden like butterflies that are just, hovering around this tree. Only Allah knows how beautiful its scent must have been and how beautiful its colors are. And when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, actually I'm going to backtrack. When he was in the seventh heaven, he met Ibrahim alayhi salam there. And Ibrahim alayhi salam, mustanidan ala Bayt al-Ma'mur, was leaning against Bayt al-Ma'mur, which is the Kaaba, above the Kaaba in the heavens. In one narration, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, I saw Ibrahim alayhi salam. I saw Ibrahim alayhi salam in Jannah. This is another riwayah, okay? Another narration. The Prophet said, I saw Ibrahim alayhi salam in Jannah, and there were these young kids running around him. So I asked him, who are these kids? Ibrahim alayhi salam said, these are children who left their parents at a young age. I'm taking care of them until their parents collect them from me on the Day of Judgment. So they're with me. There was a father who I met in Birmingham, England, whose 2-year-old daughter passed away. I went for the burial, and we were sitting in the graveyard. He was a convert to Islam. He was in a lot of pain. He was crying at his daughter's grave. And actually, he wasn't crying. He was in pain, but he didn't cry. He didn't cry. So I put my arm around him and I said to him, it's okay. Sulaiman, if you need to cry, cry. He said to me, Sheikh, my daughter was very fragile. She was so tiny and fragile. When she would sleep at night, she would say to me, Baba, don't go until I fall asleep. She didn't like being in the room alone, so I got her a little night light. She didn't like it being cold, so I got her a heater. She wanted a comfortable bed, I got her a nice mattress and a comforter. And he said to me, how do you think I feel right now after burying my daughter in this cold, lonely place, this dark grave? I don't like it. I never want to leave her. So then I said to him, I think, I want to say something to you that might bring you some happiness. So he looked at me. We're still in the graveyard, by the way. He looked at me. I said in the one riwayah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said he saw Ibrahim alayhi salam in Jannah with little munchkins, kids running around. So he asked, who are these kids? And Ibrahim alayhi salam said, these are the kids who left their parents at a young age. They're with me. So I then looked at him and I said, do you think you would have been a better parent than Ibrahim alayhi salam? Your child is in the care of the Khalil of Allah. Next year when Eid al-Adha comes, you're going to sit with your other kids and you're going to tell them the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail. Ibrahim's going to say to your daughter, let me tell you what happened. It was crazy, man. Something crazy happened in my life. Let me tell you what happened. I had a little son named Ismail and I saw this dream. He's going to tell your daughter his story himself. You should be thankful to Allah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given your child Jannah before you. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is seeing Ibrahim alayhi salam in Jannah during this night. The journey continues. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam moves on and on and on until a point comes where even Jibreel alayhi salam is no longer with the Prophet of Allah. He isn't allowed to join him. The Prophet of Allah is now in a realm, a location, a place that no creation has ever gone before. And he's standing before his Lord. I can't imagine the nature of that gathering. What happens? Who says what? Who responds with what? One of my teachers made a point though. He said, connect yourself to the Prophet of Allah. Because on the night of Isra and Mi'raj, the dust that stuck to his feet made it to the Arsh of Allah as well. You guys understand that? The dust that was on his shoes that night? It joined him on the whole Isra and Mi'raj. Stay connected to your Prophet in any capacity at all. And wherever he goes, your destination will be with him. And he's only going to great places. So this is a perfect wagon to hitch on to. Did Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam see Allah on the night of Isra and Mi'raj or not? Did he see Allah or not? This is the question. It's not a simple yes or no because we have two positions and they're both from Sahaba. So it's not one of those issues where you say that one who holds the other position is a kafir. Astaghfirullah, you can't say that. Because both positions were held by who? What did I say? Sahaba. On one side you had al-Mu'mineen Aisha radiallahu anha who refuted it. She said that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not see Allah. On the other hand, you have companions like Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh who very firmly said he did see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you guys understand? As for the verses of Surah Al-Najm, فَكَانَ قَابَ قَوْسَيْنِ أَوْ أَدْنَى فَأَوْحَى إِلَىٰ عَبْدِهِ مَا أَوْحَى, which talk about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam getting very close and then revelation occurring and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam seeing something. All these verses, they've been interpreted in both ways. Ibn Kathir rahmatullahi alayhi and other mufassirun said these verses are talking about Jibreel alayhi salam, which is a strong possibility. That on that night of Isra and Mi'raj, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was with Jibreel, and at some point, Jibreel alayhi salam exited this false form he was in and entered into his full true form. And when he presented himself in his true form, there was this magnificent view, and it was that view that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is referring to. Because in one narration we are told, the Prophet of Allah only saw Jibreel alayhi salam in his complete form how many times? How many? Three? Two? 2 times, inshallah. Right? 2 times is a more common position. Wallahu alam. There may be a 3 times riwayah. I recall the 2 times riwayah. Sheikh, 2 times, right? These young men are saying 3. Maybe there's another nuskha of something they're reading. Is it? Did you guys see it on GBT? You did? Stay away from that stuff. That stuff's dangerous. Okay. Where were we? 2 times. While the other mufassirun, and this is what it is. For example, you look at Alusi Baghdadi, Mahmud Alusi Baghdadi rahimahullah and others, they said in reality, these verses of Surah Al-Najm are all talking about Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam seeing Allah. The truth is we have no business in this conversation. If it happened in a world outside the world we're in. The whole journey was miraculous. If it happened, it happened. If it didn't happen, it didn't happen. Does that affect us? Yes or no? Will we all see Allah on the Day of Judgment? Yes. So let's just be happy in that, and that's the end of that conversation. I got nothing else to say. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam returns from the Isra and Mi'raj, he comes back with some gifts. One of them, the last 2 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. This was a gift. And if you read those verses, they're very beautiful actually. Some very powerful du'as in there. I encourage you all to spend some time with those. The second thing, the Prophet of Allah, and I really mean that. I really do. I find a lot of comfort in those last verses of Surah Al-Baqarah. Because sometimes what happens is you do your best and you wonder whether it counts or not. But when you read those verses, you see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaching us the right dua. رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا رَبَّنَا وَلَا تَحْمِلْ عَلَيْنَا إِصْرًا كَمَا حَمَلْتَهُ. These verses are, basically it's a conversation with Allah where you're saying, Ya Allah, I did my best. Don't hold me accountable beyond my means. Don't burden me with that I cannot carry. Pardon us, forgive us, overlook. It's a very beautiful kind of conversation with Allah. Because you can't be too hard on yourself too. That's a story of life. You can't be too hard. There was a sister who reached out to me recently and said that, Sheikh, when I do wudu, I feel like my wudu doesn't count, and I feel like I have to repeat my prayer again and again, and this sort of stuff. It's all OCD, by the way, obsessive compulsive disorder. That's the truth. And religious people really have a lot of OCD. The people who actually care about their deen tend to have OCD when it comes to wudu issues, tahara issues, salah issues, rak'ah issues, covering. Like there was one sister who said to me, she wears the full abaya, hijab, the whole thing. And she says that while I'm walking, I feel like my hair is exposed. It's irrational. You have a hijab on your head. Do you understand? Your hair is not exposed. I'm telling you right now, I can see your hair is covered. But shaitan is just doing that waswasa again and again and again. One guy, he came to me, he said, this is a sad one, man. He loved his wife a lot. And she loves him a lot. He says, when I'm sitting in front of my wife, when I open my mouth, no matter what I say, I feel like I'm telling her I divorced her. He said, for 4 months, I haven't stepped into my house. I love her so much, I never want her to be divorced. This is all shaitan. All of this is what, guys? If you have OCD issues, reach out to your imams and go to a therapist. Both things need to happen at once. Go to a therapist, go to your imams, get some ruqyah done, watch out for any ayn. These are things that you have to be careful of. So here we're learning in these ayat that don't go too hard on yourself. Push yourself. Do the best you can. And at the end of it, make dua to Allah and ask Him for forgiveness. Ask Him for acceptance. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Now, among the gifts is salah. Now, there's a whole story of how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was given 50, and then it finally makes its way down to how many? 5. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says that you are getting 5, but the reward of 50. And this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's beautiful because I think Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he came back from his Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, he didn't come back empty-handed. It was all about him. The night was about him. It was about honoring him, making him feel special. But he didn't come back empty-handed. He came back with salah, because that salah, as some scholars say, Mi'raj al-Mu'min. It is a moment of your ascension. When you want to go close to Allah, you have to know that you can fall into sajda, and in that moment gain closeness to Allah. Learn to find peace in your sajda. Learn to find peace in your salah. When you feel overwhelmed, feel comfortable raising your hands and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Isra wal-Mi'raj teaches us a lesson, and that is, no matter how tough things get, rely on Allah. Allah will take care of you. Now, after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam returns, he tells the Quraysh that he's a prophet. Can he hide it? Can he hide it? He can't. He's not allowed to. Anbiya alayhi salam cannot hold back revelation. Neither can they add to revelation. وَلَوْ تَقَوَّلَ عَلَيْنَا بَعْضَ الْأَقَاوِيلِ لَأَخَذْنَا مِنْهُ بِالْيَمِينِ ثُمَّ لَقَطَعْنَا مِنْهُ الْوَتِينَ. You can't hide revelation. So as a prophet, he fulfills his duty. He tells them. Now, don't you think he knows what people are going to say? Yes or no? Does he hide it though? He doesn't. He says it. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, when he hears it, he says, I believe with him without any questioning at all. Everyone else is rejecting Rasulullah. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu accepted. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam looked at him and smiled and said, you are a Siddiq. You always speak the truth. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that level of iman too. That we trust the Prophet of Allah and trust the Quran without having to convince our very feeble intellect, our very weak intellect. I'm not against it, by the way. I think it's a great idea to be intellectually convinced on something. But to make that the base of something being true is egoistic. That's not right. You guys follow what I'm saying? You ever do algebra and not understand it? How many of you look at that equation and say this equation's wrong because I don't understand it? Hussam, you do that? He probably doesn't. If Hussam does that, we would say Hussam has a big ego. The right thing to do is for Hussam to go to his Kumon instructor and say, give me more homework. Kill me, drown me in more math packs. Right? You don't deny something because you don't understand it. May Allah give us tawfiq to understand that point. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then he described, as a matter of proof, he said to them that I saw a caravan that's returning, and because I saw it on the way back, it'll return and so time. And the summary of the narration is the caravan returned exactly at that point. And this was another proof for the Quraysh, but unfortunately the Quraysh never wanted proof. They would have become Muslim a long time back. They were stubborn people. And that's why miracles for stubborn folks are actually a proof against them. It's a hujjah against them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that too. In conclusion, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's Isra wal-Mi'raj was a true incident. And I say that because some people say it's all made up. And not only did the Mi'raj happen, but it was physical, in an alert state, in a state of awakeness. Some people, they say Isra Mi'raj was just a spiritual journey. If it was a spiritual journey, or if it was something that happened in his sleep, why make a big deal out of it? Why reveal the whole Quran out of a dream? I mean, I've seen crazy dreams. You guys see crazy dreams? Yes or no? I saw a crazy dream today. I won't tell you. There's an imam who I was supposed to call back. So I saw a dream right at Fajr time that I'm calling him. I was like, oh, I should call him. That's what woke me up today. Imam Mufti Asif from Kentucky, that I need to call him. So everyone sees dreams. Why would the Quraysh make fun of a dream? This is not a matter of a dream. This is something physical, real that happened. It was a miracle. And we have no problems in believing in miracles because miracles are a part of our deen. It's something that the Quran openly talks about. The lessons from Isra al-Mi'raj, I can summarize them in 1 or 2 sentences. When it gets hard, rely on Allah. Allah will elevate you, and He will open up your heart in a way that you will have a portal of communication with Him that cannot be achieved otherwise. Struggles in life open up your heart. They give you a connection with Allah that cannot be gained otherwise. Embrace your difficulties. If I were asked to summarize all the stories of the prophets in the Quran in 1 sentence, I would say their stories are as follows. There was a person that loved Allah. Allah tested them. They kept trusting Allah, and Allah froze their memory in time. So people will always remember that these were giants who all loved Allah, and Allah tested them all. But no matter how hard the testing was, they stayed loyal to Allah. They kept to Allah. They kept to Allah. So those moments were just frozen in time for us. There are these beautiful pictures in the Quran of all these great men and women who came in the history of our timeline, who refused to give up on their Lord no matter how much shaitan pushed them to. That's the story also of our Prophet. And it's a lesson for us all. The take home from today, as we wrap up this day, is the more we learn about the Prophet, the more we learn about our deen. Knowing about the Prophet is essential. When you learn about his life, you understand the human nature of the Prophet of Allah. The struggles, the joys, the challenges. But throughout it all, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was victorious because he went through every difficulty with Allah, not in spite of Allah. So return back to your lives and take that lesson with you. That you can throw whatever you want at me. We welcome it as long as Allah is by our side. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept and keep us in these gatherings of knowledge and raise us with the righteous. Allow the seerah to be a part of our life. May Allah allow us to live by this story, and let our children, grandchildren, and those who come till the Day of Judgment be enlightened with the story of the Prophet in their hearts. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.